Digital Fashion Innovator Series here on Instagram Live. My name is Marie Bastian, and I'm the CEO and founder of World of Mesh, and I'm also your host for today's session. And before we get started with you, Hans, I just wanted to sum it up a little bit what this is all about. So this new era of digital fashion is bringing together so many amazing talents from all around the globe. And yeah, our goal is to share their story and to bring you guys on this platform and to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to inspire the fashion industry at large. And yeah, all the new generations of digital creators that are jumping in as well. And yeah, our guests are speaking all on behalf of themselves, not for their companies. And for anyone who has any questions on the session, feel free to add them down there in the comments, and we'll hopefully get back to them at the end. All right. So yeah, today's guest is Hans Olsson. Welcome so much. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad to be here as well. I'm discussing 3D and digital with you.
Yeah, and also to tell us a little about yourself and the amazing path you have behind you. So if it's okay with you, I would just give a quick introduction about Hans. So Hans is a new generation senior 3D pattern developer and senior pattern designer for menswear, women's wear, and kids wear. And yeah, you're playing a crucial role actually in realizing design visions for design teams with a focus on having a really great best fit for your consumers. But also you are driving the 3D transformation in our industry. And that's also something we really want to dive into today. Because since 2020, you're the accomplished leader and founder of the International Association of Clothing Designers and Executives. The short form is IACDE 3D Summit. And yeah, this is a biannual event for pattern makers and technical developers that are passionate about 3D. And yeah, you're playing this huge role in bringing this community together and accelerating the industry during this transformation towards 3D fashion. And that's really amazing. So we are so happy to have you on today and to hear a little bit about you.
Yeah. No, I mean, maybe I also make a quick introduction. So at the moment, I'm working at Klein as a senior 3D technical developer. And as you said, I am the founder and lead of the ICD 3D Summit, which is an amazing platform for people to come together, pattern makers and technical developers to come together and share their knowledge and network.
Exactly. So where are we reaching you today, actually? Where are you located right now?
I'm located in Amsterdam, so I've lived here since 7 years. I grew up in Stockholm and left Sweden in 2015 to do my career here in Amsterdam, and I've stayed. I really love the city. Yeah,
Amsterdam's also a real hotspot for 3D fashion, so good choice for that. Yeah, but we'd also love to hear a little bit more about your journey. So the point where you started out in fashion, maybe the starting points up to how you actually ended up in Amsterdam in this amazing company. Maybe you could give us a little overview of how your journey was in your career and the steps you took in between.
Yeah. So I started actually back in 2005. I finished education and I spent a year as a pattern making teacher. After that, I went into men's tailoring. I worked at a Swedish company called J. Lindeberg, and then I moved on to H&M and worked there for a couple of years. Then I got a bit tired of the men's tailoring and switched completely to women's wear. I was back in 2011 at the startup of Another Stories. And I stayed there until 2015 when I joined Tommy Hilfiger Tailored, so back into men's tailoring. And in 2020 I started at CK working on 3D.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've had like the menswear journey, you went over to women's wear, and I mean, I know you also did kids wear, so you have a really good overview of all the different groups also and pattern construction in general, having really experiences in all areas. So yeah, I mean, this is really has been an exciting journey for you anyway. Do you actually remember the first time on this journey that you encountered 3D fashion, or that you actually touched base with it the first time?
Yes, definitely. Back in 2013 and 14, the IACD organization had quite some events around 3D to really promote it, so that we as members could see what it was all about and how we could make use of it. And I remember coming back to work, feeling energized and feeling, yeah, this is something that we need to start with. But it wasn't possible, unfortunately, because it was too early in the start.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until 2017 when I tried Clo for the first time. I had one of those trial licenses. And then since I was working with men's tailoring, it wasn't really possible to explore it further. Then I tried in 2019 Gerber 3D, which then I felt that the systems had improved, and Gerber did nice simulations. And in 2020, when I started a role within CK, I learned all about Browseware, and that is the system I'm working in today.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that in the early, like you said, 2016, or was it 14 when you had the first contact with Clo 3D?
14, Clo 3D was 2017.
2017. Yeah, I remember back then also the starting point that they actually have with their company, and it was actually started out as a game design engine to create clothes for characters. And I remember being in there also and testing as a fashion designer, and it was lacking those technical pattern tools, and you can see how it improved over the last years, like immensely. So I can totally relate to what you said, that like after a point you got back to it later and noticed it was at a point where it could actually keep up with, you know, like Gerber systems, a traditional pattern making background. So it absolutely.
No, I mean, all of the systems have improved amazingly over the last few years, and especially since 2020, when so many people had to go into the systems and challenge them. I think that's also where the journey has been able to kick off even further.
That's a good point. People challenging the systems. Yeah, that's really the big thing that I think every software company out there creating something that's supporting creators and designers and everyone who's involved in product development, they're really looking for feedback. So it's really great also to share it with them. If anybody out there has feedback, then they're more than happy to hear from you, because the more input they have, the better it will improve, and a lot better we all can work with it as well. So that's
where your interview with Jackie, was it a month ago? And you guys talked about the trial and errors, and our ICD 3D Summit organization. We have the president of the North America chapter, Jeffrey Didach. He talked about it the other week as challenging the systems and in ways breaking the systems, because we need to break them to prove to the software companies that this is what you need to fix. This is what's not working at the moment.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's also hard to prioritize, because I'm sure they're getting input from all sides of the product development, not only pattern making, but also from designers, you know, everyone who's involved. But yeah, it is that point. You have to really test it to make sure you get all the holes covered and you got all the issues solved. But unfortunately, I think bugs are always going to be around, because it is always evolving. It's never going to be at a point. So I think it's great that you highlighted that point. It's really important for us also to get involved there, for sure. So yeah, I mean, we basically talked a little about software and how it's developing over time. And I would love to hear from you as a pattern maker who has really, I mean, you're also a technical developer right now, but you have this pattern basic knowledge and background. How does it affect your everyday work, or everybody's role as a pattern maker working with 3D, and how does it change actually their everyday work role?
I think I have a belief that 3D really will let us improve our pattern making skills. I do see that you can try stuff in 3D that before you would have to wait for a sample for a long time or stitch a sample up yourself, but you can just make these small trials in 3D. It doesn't take that long time. You don't have to wait to get back the feedback. You can see it real time, simulating, rendering in front of you. So pattern making skill, definitely. I also see that we are able to come even closer to our designers and working together with them. And that's also something that I think it's important to be able to sit in front of the computer when time allows it together to really make those styles and to translate what design, the shape and the silhouette that design wants to create. So when time allows, that's also something that I think 3D will help us with.
Yeah. So what I hear is like speed, like just speeding up processes of, you don't have to actually manufacture a sample, because I know a lot of companies also have in-house sample teams that are actually creating the garments for the approvals and the different approval rounds. And so I know I actually just recently had a conversation with somebody about pattern makers that haven't really experienced this potential that 3D is bringing to the role, and they're a little bit hesitant. Maybe they're also a little bit curious about what is this going to mean for my job and me. Like, yeah. What is something you could tell these people, like from your experience jumping over to the software? What is something that you think is really important for them to know when they're starting to engage with this and they're a little hesitant?
I think that in some ways 3D can unlock speed, but it takes time to get there. So in the beginning, I think that you don't really save time. Things will take longer. The processes will be a little bit longer. But I think you have a payout in that you get experience in the system, because at one point we will almost probably work in 3D. And you need to just get into the systems. You need to make those trial and errors, and you need to get the knowledge. And then, of course, there are true tailoring companies, true companies where maybe it won't be possible to do 3D. But in the general sense, I think that most garments will at one point you will be able to do it in 3D. So it's important to get the knowledge and experience within it.
Yeah, so rather jump on suit and then later to make sure you're up to speed with the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's definitely also a good point to keep in mind for everyone who's like a little hesitant of starting out. This is actually a really good time to get started. And I think it's a really good point as well to point out that, yeah, it's about expectation management. If you start out, it's going to be a tough cookie at the beginning, but once you get your head around it, it will speed things up, and that's a really great improvement also for working with your colleagues and teammates, like you said, the design teams and others as well. So that's really good.
And also collaborations. I mean, within 3D, you can collaborate with so many departments, because they can all use the 3D product that has been created, and it can shift and also reach the end consumer at the end of the day. But I do see that it's important that like the people that have my role, the pattern makers, if they start with it, and if we know that this pattern actually is the more or less the production pattern, it can go to production.
Yeah.
And it can also work in all of this digital space.
Absolutely. That's the important, crucial part, because I think it's also a lot about trust. People that are starting out maybe don't have quite the trust that this 3D visual of the garment is actually a representation of what it's going to actually look like. And it's like you said, having the right base pattern, making sure it's the production patterns, having the right physical properties for your fabrics you're draping. Those are all things that come together that if you have it right, it's a 1-to-1, 100% one-to-one representation of the garments. So that's something I think everyone has to experience at one point to really grab that.
Yeah, but I also think it's about like learning how garments actually look on people, because sometimes you have comments that that people want it to be nice, no drag lines, no drape, but when you actually spend time and look at the same garment on people on the streets, you notice there is certain areas have drag lines, certain areas have drape. So I think it's also a learning curve for us to know what to expect when we see that 3D garment on this avatar. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. So this is a really good insight to the role of the pattern maker. And of course, today's focus of our conversation is also on the IACDE 3D Summit that you're leading off.
Yeah.
So yeah, you started this journey back in 2020. That's when you founded the IACDE 3D Summit. And I would like to ask you a little bit of the starting point of this journey. What actually motivated you or got you to actually jump into this new journey and found this this amazing community?
Well, actually, the start or my thoughts about it came back in 2018, 2019 of 3D in general, because I was traveling to factories in China, in Turkey, and in Portugal. And I had a project with a goal to improve my block pattern, to reduce workmanship steps, and then lower the cost of the blazer garment I was working on. And when I was working, improving this pattern and talking with people in the production line and hearing the feedback that yeah, actually this was easier to stitch together. It wasn't as difficult. I could reduce the steps. I didn't have to press it so hard or do these extra steps that they had done before. I started thinking that this could actually also be something that we need to explore in 3D. Like sometimes patterns might not be 100% correct, and that causes extra steps in production. So I started stitching up those patterns in 3D, and I saw that the image looked quite good. And I also saw that some things that I had seen as workmanship errors, workmanship issues on the blazer product I had worked on, I could also see them in 3D. So I knew that certain areas where I thought this is about how the seamstress or the people in production dealt with the product, maybe that was actually about how the pattern pieces came together. 2020, when Corona started and we all had to go into work in 3D, I also wanted to take the knowledge from the IACD organization, because we have a lot of knowledge from our members. They are used to working with physical garment production. And I was thinking, from my experience, what I had seen, that if I make these changes and if I try to also apply some of the workmanship I would do in the line, like the shrink and stretch, and also made that in 3D, the actual 3D product improved the simulation and the render. So the idea was to create this event to get our members to come together, play around in 3D, experiment, try to see if they could bridge the knowledge they had in the physical production with kind of a 3D workmanship, share it with other people. Because that's what we do within the IACD organization. We meet, we have speakers on topics of innovation, and we share our knowledge. And I saw that we need to do this also within 3D. There needs to be an event covering this in 3D as well. So that's what I wanted to do, to get our organization, but also people from outside our organization to come together and network, exchange knowledge about 3D.
Yeah, that's really interesting. At the beginning of your answer, you mentioned a point which actually Jackie also mentioned during our last interview, Jackie King. It's the using 3D pattern also as a control tool to see if the patterns are actually correct and everything's in place. That's really interesting, and that's a really good point. Yeah, because if you stitch it together and there's a like one pant length of the front part is longer than the back one, you'll definitely see that, and there'll be effect that shows right away. And during Jackie's conversation, we talked about the stitches going along the shoulder. If you forget on the back of the tech pack, you know, that mistake can get lost. So there's parallels helping here within the different product development stages, and that's really interesting in pattern as well.
Yeah. No, I really think that, and that's what I said also, that 3D will improve our pattern making skills, because when we explore the system, when we can get this direct feedback, then we will get better pattern makers. But I also think that we need to come together to do it together and to share the knowledge and the learnings. So that's what we do in the 3D Summit, based on an assignment.
Yeah, that's so nice. So, I had the pleasure also to be part of the last summit. I was really happy that you guys got me on board as a host in the Clo 3D breakout room, and I got to experience this community, and I got in contact with the technical developers and the pattern makers joining these events, and it's a lovely group of people, and it was a really nice to be a part of that. And I would like to ask, maybe hear from your side a little bit, what you think is the what is unique and special about this community? How do you see this community, like, being like a unique space for people that are interested in 3D fashion?
I think that the uniqueness is that there are so many different people coming together. At the last event, we had people joining from LA that got up like 3 o'clock in the morning to be able to join us, and people in Japan that stayed until past midnight to see the end of the show. So we have a wide spectrum of users, of people coming together. It's also people from fast fashion, from high street brands, from some luxury fashion brands, but also factory workers working in 3D. So it's a huge spectrum of users coming together that really need to excel and upskill in 3D. And I think it's great that we can do it together, that we also have these people joining from the factories, and that's maybe something that we should explore a bit further going forward, because they sit right next to the garment production, so they also have valuable knowledge to share with us that are a bit further away from it.
Absolutely, it's a good mix, and it's great that you have also people from the production sites also involved, because that's when we're talking about end-to-end transformations, that's also a big point that people usually tackle during the end, not at the very beginning, but at some point you want to get them also involved after, you know, design and development and patterns all onboarded. Usually those are the next steps. But yeah, it's a lovely group of people. They're super collaborative. Everyone's curious to present their work and to share their learnings and their best tips and tricks with the community. So it's a really amazing accomplishment, that and I think, you know, group of people that you got together, and also doing all of this while you actually have a job on the side too. So that's very
that they take the time to do the assignment, because it's not an easy assignment. Or we have different levels, you can join as a beginner, you can join from mid-level or from an expert level, and you make as much as you can. For most of us, finding the time to do this assignment outside of work hours is a bit challenging and is a bit tricky, but we also have this rule that to enter the breakout rooms of the event, you need to complete something. You need to give something back to us, because that's how we see that we get the discussions and the knowledge sharing into the event.
Absolutely. So that's a really good introduction to the next question, actually, because I was going to ask you if you could tell a little bit about the upcoming event, because I know the next IACDE 3D Summit is coming up on November 4th, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about how participants can join, what the event will be about, a little bit about the topic.
Yeah. So the event now, we've changed it. We've opened it up for everyone to join. You can join for free. So on the 4th of November, the event theme is 1950s and 60s French haute couture, pushing the limits on 3D. And as I said, as Jeffrey had said, we want to break the systems, or as Jackie said, it's about trial and errors. And these garments are not easy to do. Also here we have different levels, but some of them are not easy to do. And maybe one or two of them we won't really be able to perform and hit the level we want to go to. But it's all about pushing the limits on the 3D. You can sign up to the event. I'm not sure if you will be able to share a registration link afterwards on World of Mesh.
Maybe send me the link. I'll just put it into the edits before I post it.
Yeah. So anyone can join, regardless if you're a pattern maker, designer, or just a 3D enthusiast that want to see what's going on. At this day, we will have a keynote speech from a fashion historian. She will talk about the 50s and 60s.
Ooh, nice.
How the French haute couture was challenged by the ready-to-wear. And then we will have some workflow demonstrations in different 3D systems. And we will launch the digital assets. So the garment patterns, the digital fabrics, and all details about the assignments will be launched on that day. And then everyone will have up until April to make their assignments. And in between, we will have some dates set up for workshops for people to come together and to share knowledge.
Amazing. This sounds so exciting, and I can't wait for it to start. You guys put a great agenda together, and if anyone's already interested in getting more information, feel free to also have a look on LinkedIn. I'm sure they can also connect with you and with the IACDE 3D Summit. The agenda is also up there. I think I shared that as well.
Yeah.
So all together, it's a wonderful platform. It's collaborative, and it's also open for anyone to join, which I love about this new 3D movement. This sharing and this open mindset that people are bringing to the table. So it's super nice that you put all your effort into making this actually happen. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I think it's already a half hour. I can't imagine how fast time went.
Quick.
Yeah. So I'll just have a look shortly. If you guys have any questions, we could still get to them. Yeah. I see a lot of people greeting you here. Oh, here's a question from Gaida. So the question is, what kind of new skills would be valuable for pattern makers as the industry is switching to 3D? I think we covered that a little bit, but maybe we can still see if there's anything.
That you need to get the knowledge about the 3D systems, and I think that what is good with it is that you get to see the garment on an avatar directly, so you will be able to judge how things look. And I also covered that sometimes people want things to be a bit more flat and not with too much drapes. But I think we will learn to adjust to how garments actually look like on people. So you need to learn, that is also a learning to adjust to that, to see that, okay, this is actually looking as it should look. I think sometimes we have this idea of garments looking like cartoons, or like in the metaverse or in gaming.
Yeah.
So we still need to learn to get the eye on how garments actually drape, which I think also will improve us. We will improve our pattern making skills. Maybe I just said that already. I don't know what more to cover.
No, but that's a good point that you also mentioned. I just want to highlight this again. A lot of people, like in real life, they try to iron everything to make everything look nice and have it nice and smooth and clean. And in 3D, actually, the challenge is to get those those realistic wrinkles into the garment, and to add all these details that make a garment look real, because it often, like you said, ends up in being perfectly polished. Like if you have a t-shirt that looks like it's made out of rubber because it has no folds anymore. It's actually opposite. It's really interesting how, how after a time when you work with 3D, you understand that it's actually more about getting this realistic drape inside and the characters that a real garment has, with all the folds coming in the garment. So that's a good point. I think that's pretty straightforward. Maybe one more question here we have from Emily Lilly. She asked if you prefer Clo or browswear.
I mean, I worked in Clo back in 2017, only that trial month that you got. I work in browswear today, and as I said, sometimes I've seen that things that I thought was workmanship issues from the production line might actually be how these pattern shapes comes together. And that tells me that I'm working in a system that I can trust. So maybe that's also what we need to look out for, that when you stitch things together, if everything looks really perfect, then maybe the system is not the best one, because you will have some patterns that you get from a factory that might not look 100% perfect. And then you will have to do some tweaks, as I talked about 3D workmanship. How do we do those shrink and stretch as they would do in production to make it look good? So yeah, that would be my take. That from what I know, browswear, I know I can trust it because I've tried in it. I haven't tried Clo enough to be able to say yes or no on that question.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that. They have one tool at one point that they preferred and they work with, and they are also evolving over time, like all different tools. And it's hard to really say something about another tool that you're not so familiar with as the one that you just love and you use every day. But I think you can say generally, like browswear is very much used in production, and I'm not surprised that in pattern that's usually a tool that you come across a lot. But yeah, Clo's also moving in this area a lot more, and a lot has changed over the past years, so it's definitely also coming to that point for Clo. Yeah, and I guess it's at the end of the day is whatever you work with best. I mean, they're both amazing tools. They have both their pros and cons, and I guess it also really, at the end of the day, depends on the company you're working for, which really works for their system, which one plugs in the best.
And I think also some companies have started working with several different 3D systems. Yeah,
there are new ones coming up too.
Different groups works better in a certain system. So then you might have to expand it in that way as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just at PI Apparel recently, or this year, and there was I came across CAD, which is a upcoming 3D software program for fashion, style 3D. There's a lot of interesting newbies coming up too that are shaking up the industry. So it's really exciting times. Yeah. Okay, so if we forgot any questions, as usual, feel free to post them underneath this video on Instagram or wherever, and we'd hope to answer everything. So just want to make sure we didn't forget any questions. I think
the register will also be up there somewhere then.
Exactly. We'll add that to the notations then. Perfect. So thank you so much for joining, Hans. This was an absolute pleasure to speak to you and to hear your impression of the industry, and to hear more about the IA-CDE 3D Summit that's coming up, and about your journey that you made in the last years. It was really amazing to hear all this, so thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me and for making it possible for me to join.
Absolutely. Sorry, you can say the last thing again. I think I overspoke that.
And promote the 3D Summit.
Yes, yes. Amazing. So yeah, at this point, I think with 36 minutes, we're a little bit over it, but I think we're still okay. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you guys for tuning in as well. I hope you guys have a great week ahead, and looking forward to our next Digital Fashion Innovator session, which will be the Innovator of November. Information will follow as usual. So stay tuned, and yeah, bye-bye everyone.